So thank you, Ricardo, and thank you for having me here. So it is easier and at the same time harder to come after your presentation because it is much broader. But as Samway created the background on which I can make my presentation. So in terms of your table, we'll zoom in on the quadrant of coercive and EU-centric policies. And this is what CBAM means. So the first thing is I want to highlight that several things that have been said even before, and you will see also drawing on something that we've seen before. But the key thing is that clearly we are facing a global problem. And we are not at the moment, even though we have several labs, we don't have a global solution. And so what the European Union is doing is to try to work with a local solution and trying to make this solution some way global. So from an economic point of view, the key issue is the old one, that is we are facing a negative externality when firms and therefore countries afterwards produce, they start polluting and there are emissions, and this is something that is not priced by the market. And has been highlighted before that the economists have come up with what they think is a smart it's a smart solution to all this. So the idea is to put some kind of price on this externality so that firms can internalize the externality and make decisions that make sense and are not so negative for the community. And the idea is to go through this market system that is generating prices that are considered to be fair in the sense that they are forcing indeed the firms to internalize these prices. Now, the problem with all this, and it's been highlighted, this is a picture we've seen already this morning, has been highlighted. It is unfortunately, this is, not all countries are taxing carbon. This is taken from the ICAP. We've seen this picture before. You don't have to get into the details, just look at the colors, and then you see that it is only a fraction of the countries that have in place ETS system. Some have an ETS system under development and some under consideration. Essentially, you look at the blue ones, and this is only a fraction of the world. And actually, according to analysis by the World Bank, less than 25% of global emissions are taxed, and only 5 of them face a carbon price that is compatible with the Paris Agreement's goal, which is some way discounting, making less relevant that less than 25% number that we've seen. And so given that this is a patchy, and I just, because you've seen the picture before, I've removed another picture from the ICAP, which is showing across these countries which sectors have been are involved in the ETS system and what are these different prices. And I mean, that picture was quite revealing because it was making it visual that not only you have few countries, but also among themselves, they're not very harmonized. And what is the issue with all this has been already highlighted. Of course, it is the carbon leakage. So you can do whatever you want with your local production, assuming you're successful, but then there are a lot of other things that may happen in the other countries. And so there is a negative externality that is not coming from your own production, but is coming from the production of the other countries. And this may happen because your firms are moving their carbon-intensive production abroad to countries that are not blue or that not as virtuous as blue in the previous picture, or that may happen when the products of your companies that are produced in a virtuous way are replaced by more carbon-intensive imports from abroad. And so this is the idea. So a global problem with local solutions may work in different ways, in the sense that you may at some point come up with a global solution, or the idea, I'm making it very stark, but the idea of the European Union is that you can export your local solution in some way, induce the other countries, and so it was the incentive part of your slide. you can in some way induce the other countries to follow suit. And this is some way the idea in a very reduced way. This is the idea of the carbon border adjustment mechanism. So what is the idea here is that, simply stated, there is something that is produced abroad that is produced not according to the standards, environmental standards that are in the European Union. And this means essentially from an economic point of view that usually it costs less to produce without complying with these standards. And so you have a competitive edge if you're producing outside the European single market. And in order to compensate for this advantage with respect to the local companies, you want to impose a carbon tariff. So on a certain number of sectors, these are the ones that are covered in Europe. And the idea is really to create some kind of balance, I mean, to rebalance the competition from abroad. And this has entered into force in last May and will be in effect in 2026. So we are there. So how it works, just to clarify. So you have the single market, and here you don't have many problems because assuming that you're able to make your companies comply, you have strong incentives to do that. But then the problem is at the border where you may have products that come from outside and have to enter. And now the idea here is that you have, if you want to sell this product locally or if you want to import this product, you have to get hold of some certificate from national competent authorities. And these certificates are going to cost to have a price that is related to the ETS price. So in a way that is market oriented, the price is settled inside the European Union for these certificates, and then the certificates are sold to importers into the European Union. So visually, this is a graph from the German Energy Agency. You clearly see this is the border, the EU single market, extra EU market. Third country installation is producing goods that are relevant for the CBAM mechanism. And this may be imported, but then if they are imported, you have to some way get the certificate that is going to tell how much you are being complying with equivalent standards as in EU in your country of origin. And then this is the level playing field mechanism in the sense that the compliant companies or factories inside the European Union are going to face this cost of compliance. Those who are abroad, they don't have at the origin cost of compliance, they're going to pay a tax, an import tariff, so that everybody is playing on the same ground. Now, so the idea is therefore to put a fair price on the carbon emitted in the production that is entering the single market. And the ambition is that this is going to be incentive compatible. The entire system is going to be incentive compatible for the domestic firms because they know that they're going to be shielded against competition is considered unfair from abroad. And the other part, which is this idea of exporting your local solutions, should encourage cleaner industrial production in EU countries because then the companies there have an incentive to comply in order to get access to the internal single market. And as I said, this fair price is going to be determined in relation to the European Union emissions trading system or later gradual introduction with parallel phase out of the allocation of the allowances. So I have 4 questions that I want to share with you. The first is from a practical point of view. So since we've seen before, unfortunately, Timo's presentation has been cut, but I'm relieved to hear that he's doing fine. There's something you can do with the data. So you can actually do this sort of called real-time research or something like that. Essentially, you have the data to figure out whether carbon leakage is really a problem or it's just an invention of the European Commission. And so is it a problem? Second, does CBAM create a level playing field? So is it solving this kind of problem? for the domestic market. Third question, is it the way to export the solution also to foreign markets? And then the final one where I will conclude is whether we are indeed putting our money where our mouth is. So indeed, the entire framework of industrial policy is consistent with what we want to achieve. So first question, of course, I mean, the risk of leakage is real, so it's not an invention in Brussels. There's a very nice recent review by Lionel Fontanier and Kathleen Schubert. And I mean, they're surveying all the existing evidence, and their conclusion is that it is real. This doesn't mean that there is no debate about the subject itself. So the leakage is real. The debate is the CBAM something that is going to work in that direction? So we said there are two ambitions in the CBAM. The first is that you want to create a level playing field for your own companies so that they have an incentive to behave in a virtuous way and comply with the system is being designed. And the second is, can you export this model abroad? So first question, does the CBAM create a level playing field? So the answer is yes in the domestic market. So let's assume everything works and the prices are correct and the certifications are done in the correct way. So in the optimistic scenario, so it is going to work, because then the price of goods at the border in terms of their carbon content would be the right one. And this would create a level playing field inside the domestic market. The problem is that when a lot of firms, not all firms actually, the fraction of exporters is tiny with respect to the total number of firms, but there are firms, especially the big ones, that are exporting a lot. And the CBAM is doing little in terms of helping EU firms competing in foreign markets. So it is a tool that is allowing to create a level playing field inside the European Union, but not in other countries. So if you sell to other countries that don't have this idea of ETS, or they have a pricing that is not in line with the European one, there's not much that the CBAM is doing. There is some idea of compensation, but the tool that the economics would suggest as the tool to be used are export subsidies. So when you go to a market in which you face additional challenges because you're competing with local firms that don't have the cost of compliance, then you give an export subsidy. The problem is that this is hardly compatible with the rules of the WTO. So already the CBAM, there is some debate whether it is compatible or not, but for sure the export subsidies are not. So this is an important sticking point to remember. Is CBAM exporting a way to export the solution? So I think this is something on which, of course, people in international relations have much more to say in terms of the dynamics of what is happening these days. But we might run the risk as Europeans to overestimate the incentive for the other countries to comply. So the idea is that the single market is important enough, and it is nowadays, to incentivize those countries to also price carbon to avoid compensation through the CBAM. At the same time, there is something that is going on, and it is enshrined or acknowledged by the title of the World Trade Report by the WTO this year, that says Reglobalization Event is the title. And the idea is that trade relations are reorganizing around geopolitical fault lines, which means that you may create, as you're creating different blocks of trading between countries that share similar values, between inverted commas, or similar priorities. And so decoupling, for example, between the West and the China sphere, you may have the same happening in terms of carbon taxation. And so this could be an overestimation of the incentive that countries have outside Europe have to comply, because maybe in the near future, the trade of the European Union will not be so important as before for those countries, or the ambition to enter this market will be some way diminished by the geopolitical clashes. Now, the last question was, are we putting our money where our mouth is? And here we've heard a lot today about different aspects. Here I'm just listing some keywords. industrial policy, regulatory capture of special interest in different areas, national security, which is the catch-all escape clause of the WTO. You can do all sorts of things if you can argue that it is in the interest of national security. Protectionist, rent-seeking. So this is an area that is quite gray. And again, I'm really sorry that Thibaut could not go on with his presentation because he had this interesting for me line on information and the use of asymmetric information. I found an interesting briefing by the European Parliament Research Service, a recent one that was stressing the importance of tighter coordination with the US. So we've seen the map, few countries are already on the ETS track. Some of these countries, or most of these countries, don't really cooperate. There's something to be said about the natural cooperation in principle between the US and Europe, both because of similarity in technologies, similarity also in terms of political preferences, at least at international level, and also, one has to say, in terms of emitting emissions. However, so far we've seen a little going this way, especially because where we put the money, so the industrial policies are some way very isolationist in the sense that the Inflation Reduction Act invested billions of dollars in favor of clean energy and technology, but made in America, which is immediately opening up rent-seeking and captured by lobbies. The reaction of the European Union last March has been to launch the IRA, the NZIA, which is Net Zero Industry Act, which is again something that is some way reproducing the unilateral approach on this side of the pond. So along the four questions that I've raised, I think that there are some yeses, but a lot of no's, meaning that at the moment, there are things that have to be improved a lot in terms of the reach out of this policy. Thank you.